So I'm going to say 3 or 4 final things as we close up. First, I'd like to ask Diandra Bruised to come forward. I understand there was a Indigenous Caucus meeting held earlier on this morning, which I'm very glad to hear. I'm going to try not to knock over that podium. And I want to give Diandra a chance to share one of the statements or the statement that came out of it. So a round of applause for Diandra, please.
Thank you, Graham. Is Charlie in the room? Okay. We had planned this, I swear. But we did want to ask for those Indigenous members who are capable, who have donated their words to this statement. I'd really like if you guys could stand up in solidarity as this is spoken, just at your tables, if you can. So acknowledging that we are on the Algonquin, Mississauga territory in Ottawa. Addressing and acting on the climate and biodiversity crisis affecting us, our lands, and our territories is beyond immediate and requires bold and transformative solutions. Nature-based solutions are increasingly referenced in mainstream culture to describe how Indigenous peoples have and continue to interact with the land, water, and all of creation. We are glad that they and you are finally listening. However, the current framing of these solutions continues to conceptualize humans as separate from nature, commodify nature in terms of balance sheets and offsets, and views the land and water as void of Indigenous peoples and open for development. Clearly, we need a complete rethink. Real solutions, truly nature-based solutions, require a transformation beyond the mainstream approach that shifts the paradigm away from a hyper-consumerist culture to a paradigm rooted in relationships valuing the nexus of people, land, and reciprocity. Nature-based solutions must recognize that Indigenous peoples, whether Blackfoot, Mi'kmaq, Anishinaabe, Cree, or Métis, are nations that can hold inherent, treaty, and constitutionally protected rights to their lands, waters, and territories. Any solution must simultaneously empower Indigenous peoples to exercise their authority and contribute to reconciliation. Without this, and even with the most progressive intents, dominant society will continue to marginalize Indigenous peoples and our land tenure systems. Nature-based solutions have an opportunity to facilitate fundamental change so that Indigenous knowledge and value systems can function with integrity and without being disrupted. Such systems are based on reciprocal. Such systems are based on reciprocal and restorative understandings. We cannot shift Indigenous knowledge from one monolithic system to another, nor can we misconstrue Indigenous knowledge as data or backup. We have to stop treating it as such. In this way, dominant concepts of natural resource management cannot be confused with Indigenous perspectives on territorial management or land relationship planning. Indigenous-led nature-based solutions, such as the grasslands, are tangible examples of Indigenous peoples challenging the overwhelming desire to commodify nature. True nature-based solutions cannot be measured in the numbers of trees planted, tons of carbon being sequestered, or valuation and benefits shared. This is a conversation about responsibility and respect. Responsibilities we share with each other, responsibilities to the animals that sustain and protect us, responsibilities to our land and waters, and responsibilities to all of creation. We urge you to begin or continue with the hard work that requires an ongoing relationship building process with Indigenous peoples. Reconciliation is not a magical finish line. It is day-to-day relationship building based on reciprocity. Thank you.
So I have, take this out. I feel like there's some people around there I want to see every once in a while. Okay, so I have some thank yous I want to do. I want to talk a little bit about next steps and then say a few final words about where we're going and some of the themes that I think emerged, but I won't take too long. First of all, I want to thank the organizers. And when I say the organizers, what I mean is the people who keep the wheels on, who are making sure everything runs as smoothly as possible. I especially want to thank the two people who've been focused on this summit for months, which is Emma Buchanan and Natasha Jovanovic. They're at the back there. But also the whole gang of Nature Canada and David Suzuki Foundation staff that are here working a variety of different logistical issues and volunteers. So thanks very much to the organizers. Those of you who know me know that there's no finer compliment than I can pay than to call someone an organizer. And now the architects. I'd like to ask, I'm going to read out the names of the steering committee organizations, and if you are among one of the steering committee organizations, it's a good thing you're already standing, Kat, because you won't have to stand when I read Climate Action Network's name. If you're one of the steering committee organizations that I read, could you please stand up? Birds Canada, Climate Action Network Canada, Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society, Canadian Wildlife Federation, David Suzuki Foundation, Environmental Defense, Freshwater Alliance, IUCN, Nature Canada, Nature Conservancy Canada, Nature United, WCS Canada, WWF Canada, and then concurrent session organizers Alice Canada, Ducks Unlimited Canada, Equiterre, Seed Change, NRDC, and West Coast Environmental Law. When I say that this was a collaboration, I truly mean it. There are people standing here and some that are not currently represented who were truly the architects behind large portions of the summit, and it was a true collaboration among those organizations. This is our summit and everyone's summit, but the steering committee most particularly, and so please give them a round of applause for all of the work they've done. And then finally, of course, the sponsors, right? Environment and Climate Change Canada and Metcalf Foundation is presenting sponsors, Parks Canada, Gosling Foundation, and many of the organizations I just listed, including and not including or in addition to the Ivy Foundation and IBC, the Insurance Bureau of Canada. We very much appreciate your support and your leadership in making this happen. So thank you as well.
And thank you to Graham.
Chief cook and bottle washer. Yes. No job too big, no job too small, right, Emma? There you go. Okay, now in terms of next steps, we are going to keep building the resource page, so go back to the website. If there's stuff you want added to the resource page, you should be able to find presentations there soon, but send us stuff if you want to add stuff. We are going to be creating some videos based on the live streaming that's been going on and other footage, and we'll share those with folks. There's going to be a facilitated conversation among the steering committee about how we want to proceed. We're going to send out some kind of post-summit survey next week, including some questions related to your interest in participating or not in other kinds of follow-up activities. So please try to take a few minutes to answer that survey when you see it. That'll save us having to send it to you 3 more times until we give up on you. But please do take a minute. We promise it won't be asking you to write essays. We are going to circulate the participants list to help you facilitate your networking. Unfortunately, we can't send all your contact information to everyone. We're just going to send your name and organization to the degree that we have it. And if you really need to get in touch with someone, you can contact Emma or myself, and we might be able to help facilitate that. We're going to work with the concurrent session leads to draft an outcome report that will be shared, and I think every concurrent session will have its own kind of follow-up activities that I'm assuming, and I don't have a full read on what was associated with that. As I said, it's a very decentralized organizing model, and so I'm assuming that the leaders on natural infrastructure are going to continue to lead, et cetera, et cetera. So in terms of what came out of the past couple days, and what are some of the themes or learnings? I mean, at a summit like this, there's always a bunch of intangibles, right? Things you don't know. Someone like Stephen Nita has given a speech and inspired someone in some ways that he will never know, and they go off into the world with this new piece of knowledge, and we can't quantify that or measure it. There's also so much of what happens at these things happens on the sidelines. It's the connections we make, the conversations we have, the things that aren't in the agenda at all but occur in the margins. And then there's also what Joanna Kerr of Tide said to me when we were talking earlier. There's this energy that gets created that helps you go back into the world and keep fighting the good fight. It's sort of the reduction of cognitive dissonance, the notion that you're not alone. This is actually happening. There are people standing with you who see these problems and want to work with you. And there's an intangible that can't be measured there. So to Tim Sopuck, if he's still here, I want to say we love you. We love Manitoba. Manitoba matters. And I would say the same thing to everyone else, of course. So what are some of the themes or learnings that I think emerged? The first one I would say that was very clear is try to avoid getting audited by Julie Gelfand. Because you can take Julie Gelfand out of the Environment Commissioner's office, but you clearly cannot take the Environment Commissioner's office out of Julie Gelfand. Second, I would say that it was very clear that the government stood up here over the past couple days and said, we want to hear from you. Right? If you didn't hear that, I don't think you were listening. We had like 60 or 70 federal government officials here. That's not Moses going to the mountain. That's the mountain coming to Moses. Right? And so they have in good faith come here and said, we are asking ourselves these questions. We want to have this conversation. We're looking forward to hearing from you. And it's now everyone else's responsibility. They have opened that door, and we have to walk through it. And if we don't, we have no one to blame but ourselves. So everyone here clearly needs to take the initiative to follow up with those issues that are most important to them, because they could not have been more clear about the fact that they are open to feedback and are looking for input and are asking themselves some very difficult questions. Another theme, I think, in the words of Claudette Commanda, and I think it was just reflected in the statement, is that the eagle has landed, right? I think it's clearly the Indigenous voices that emerged over the course of the past 2 days were some of the most impassioned, some of the wisest, some of the most concrete in terms of delivering results that we had throughout the summit. And I was going to quote Stephen Nita's speech at length in terms of some of what I felt was sort of a transcendental rising up of concepts and then bringing it down to the earth with very real results. 300,000 acres that are actively being protected. But I think I want to let that statement stand for itself, because it was an important thing to hear, and I want to thank you for that. And then finally, and I think that I kind of feel like I'm mixing my metaphors here a little bit, and I think it's ironic that I'm with all due respect to all the government people here, I think it's ironic that I'm actually going to be quoting 3 government people as the final inspiration thoughts for the summit. So on the one hand, I thought John Cudahy said a very interesting thing from Infrastructure Canada when he said, it's interesting to think about how far we have come, how long it has taken us to get here, and how much further we have to go. And I think it's okay to acknowledge all 3 of those things. You know, this conversation is long overdue. It took far too long, but that doesn't mean we haven't come a distance in the meantime. And we still have a long way to go, and it's a journey. Secondly, I think Beth McNeil, the first woman to head the Forestry Service in its 120-year history, she said at one stage, we're at a crossroads. And I think we are. And I think to some degree, the reason why there's 400 people who have been crammed into this space over the past 2 days, why we're all here is because we kind of recognize that. There's something about this moment. And with all due respect to the great organizers and the architects and the team effort that brought everyone together, this was also a reflection of the desire on all of our parts to have this conversation. And so we are at a kind of crossroads right now. And then finally, I would say that, Jackie Mercer from Environment Canada, at some stage when she was trying to talk about what was going on, she said, we're connecting the dots. And so on the one hand, you have this sort of idea of the journey where we've come so far and have so much further to go. You've got this idea of the crossroads where we find ourselves at an exciting moment with real choices to make. And then you've got this notion of the dots that are needing to be connected. And what are the dots, right? On the one hand, you've got these really big dots. You might actually think of it as canyons, where it's these twin crises coming together, these 2 great existential issues facing humanity in terms of widespread species collapse, 1 million species gravitating towards extinction on the one hand, and the climate emergency on the other. And then similarly, in terms of obviously big challenges that we struggle with, is the challenge of reconciliation. But then there are also all these dots between our communities. In some ways, our respective communities represent dots of their own. You've got the funding community, you've got the NGO community, you've got government and various different levels of government, you've got business, you've got Indigenous peoples. And then there are the dots around what are the tools that we have to move forward that we're going to use, the protected areas, offsets, restoration, natural infrastructure, and the dots about the landscapes that position us and that we get absorbed in and that we are part of and have relations with. Agriculture and grasslands, urban areas, wetlands, forestry, ocean and coastlines. And then there are the dots between regions in a country that is so widely divided, so frustrated with our union at this stage, and a recognition that in this kind of divided country, once again, as I said the other day, we got 20% of the world's fresh water, 24% of the world's wetlands, 30% of the world's remaining boreal forest, 30% of the world's remaining temperate forest, the largest coastline in the world. If there's anything that unites us within the context of a divided country, it is nature, and it is our role and our relationships with it, and those dots as well. So what we've been doing over the past 2 days is kind of laying out these dots on the table. And we've even started maybe a little bit to connect some of these dots. But moving forward, it's now our job to keep connecting these dots after this summit ends. And as we connect these dots, I think what we're going to see is that constellations or shapes will begin to emerge. We'll see pathways emerging that we can walk down together. And it was never our intention to show up here and say, here's the answer. Because we're at that crossroads, kind of a new frontier. We got 400 people in the room. No one has the answer. It was never our intention to just say, here it is. There's too many questions. We got too far to go, too many dots. But I do think that we have all clearly demonstrated that there is a huge, powerful, and exciting community here that wants to move forward with nature-based solutions to climate change. I feel like we have made a little bit of progress in identifying some of the pathways forward. And so the challenge is for each of us to now move decisively down the trail of your choice and invite others to come with you. So on behalf of the organizers, the funders, and the steering committee, I want to say happy trails. And we're looking forward to moving forward together. Thank you very much.